Hello, it's Jim Powers with another video on the Hobie Tandem Island. This one's a little bit different. It's an interview with Bob Morton, otherwise known as Fusion Engineering on the Hobie Islands forum. And we're going to spend time, just the two of us, sharing the modifications we've made to our respective Hobie Tandem Islands. This is Bob on the left and myself on the right, and we're going to have a fairly lengthy conversation just around modifications that were made to our Hobie Tandem Islands. This is our agenda, so the introductions, a little bit about the environment that we sail in, the Hobie TI improvements, and some future ideas, and then we'll end up with some discussion around using the Hobie Tandem Island in the Florida Keys, what to expect from currents and water conditions. There's just a few samples here of some of the modifications that have been done by Bob and some of the future ideas that I've brought to the table. We're going to discuss these in depth throughout this interview. So what comes next is just an interview. I'm going to stop with the introduction here. We're going to jump right into a conversation between Bob and myself, talking about the Hobie Tandem Island and some of the modifications that were made for offshore sailing. So let's take a look. All right, welcome to a Hobie Island interview with Fusion Engineering. This is a screen name, I believe, on the Hobie forum, and we have with me today Robert Morton. I believe that's your full name.
Yeah.
With a Fusion Engineering as is handle on the Hobie forum. And the purpose for this particular YouTube is just to dig deep into the Hobie Tandem Island and take a look at some of the modifications that Fusion Engineering, along with myself, has made to our Hobie Tandem Islands, kind of explore why we're making these changes to the Hobie Tandem Island and share some of our experiences that kind of drove that. And then we'll end up this discussion looking at some future possible changes to the Hobie Tandem Island that we want to bring forward to the Hobie company. And then also take a look at the Florida Keys and how the Hobie Tandem Island can be used in that environment. What are some of the things to look for and look out for? So we're going to start with some brief introductions. Let me just go over the agenda for today, and then we'll have some brief introductions. So we'll start with the introductions. We'll then get into the sailing environment, the water requirements that drive the need to explore changes to the Hobie Tandem Island. We'll talk about some of the actual changes that have been implemented in the Hobie Tandem Island, and Bob will share some of his experiences with multiple changes that he's made over the years. I will do the same, but more forward-looking at some ideas that be candidates to incorporate into future Hobie Tandem Islands. And then we'll end up with a discussion around the Florida Keys, including some snorkeling opportunities in the Florida Keys. So with that, I will start with the introductions, and we'll turn it over to Bob to introduce himself, and then I'll do the same. So go ahead.
Hi, I'm Bob Morton. I've been an enthusiast with Hobie kayaks since right around 2007, 2008. And we started out with the pedal kayaks. We had a couple Revos and a Oasis. And when I was growing up, I grew up on the Mississippi, and I had a sea fish or whatever they call sailfish. I don't know.
Sunfish, yeah.
Sunfish, yeah. And growing up, and I got in a lot of trouble on the Mississippi with that. And then I didn't do much, after that, because I was busy working, most of my life. And I kind of retired in 2007 and looking for stuff to do. So we rented a few kayaks, but they were just paddle kayaks. And we were only able to go, maybe a mile or two. And it wasn't very productive and very tiring. So we ended up going and buying the Hobie pedal kayaks, which we fell in love with. And we kept on upgrading, and the rest is history. It's me being an engineer. I engineer things, overthink, and stuff like that. So And I've since retiring, I had to have stuff to do, so to keep my mind occupied. So I did a lot of tinkering, and I used to race hydroplanes when I was younger, and I was a big motorhead as well. So just about killed myself with 3-point hydroplanes. Um, so I have a lot of experience, and I built several boats, hand built, um, 3 of them over the years. So I'm pretty familiar with all the techniques in boat building and things like that. So, and then being a tool and die maker, master craftsman, I've got the skills to be able to build pretty much anything. Um,
That's great. And then
without
professionally, you're an engineer, and I guess you're still doing some of that currently.
Yeah, and I design products. That's what my company does. I've got like 60. Even though I'm retired, I still got like 65 different projects and programs going right now. Pretty much for any industry, it doesn't matter. I'm like a whore. I do anybody in the way that I some of my inventions and patents are related to the oil field industry that got us all the new gas and stuff like that. So, and then I've done a lot of patented stuff on medical devices, internal heart things, uh, blood bypass for open heart surgery, all just anything and everything I've designed over the last
Some excellent
50
skills for
years.
the Hobie Tandem Island.
And so and after I retired, I was used to traveling all over the world continuously for, probably 40 years, running huge giant corporations. And after I retired and kind of hung up my airline tickets, because I've traveled around the world 5, 6 times, been to a lot of places, and I needed something to keep my mind occupied, so I picked the kayaking. It was a good exercise program, and then the Tandem Islands just worked out pretty good. I went into the dealer, cash in hand, to go buy a Hobie 16. And they just came out with the Tandem Island, and this was
Hmm.
April 2010. And I think he showed me the first one in this area,
Hmm.
um, and said, talked it all up, and so I ended up buying the Tandem Island and
Wow.
trying it out. And that same day, that was on a Thursday, me and my wife went out to the open ocean, from Sarasota Bay, to out. It's called Big Bay or something like that, Big Pass.
Yeah.
And we got it was late afternoon, and we got stranded because the tide was going out and the wind
Yeah.
died.
Get
And
shallow. Yeah.
for the next probably 3 hours or so, we were pedaling like mad,
Against the
trying to get
current.
back in,
Yeah.
and we couldn't do it. We ended up having to go along the shore, walk up the shore with the boat.
Yeah.
So that was the first day. So it was
And that probably drove some
eye-opening
ideas in your
experience.
mind about
Yeah,
not doing that again.
well, we got to make this thing work a little bit better. So that got me started on improving it.
Yeah.
And then, the wife was mad because
That's
she
another
was
motivation.
totally
Yeah.
worn out. And, we'd done a lot of kayaking for the last 2 years, down in the Keys and pretty much everywhere. We
Yeah.
had, we over the years, we probably got 250,000 road miles
Wow.
on hauling kayaks around the country, dropping
Yeah.
in every body of water
Hmm.
that we could ever find, with kayaks and the
Yeah.
the island and things like
So,
that.
so 2011, you picked up your first Hobie Tandem Island, if I heard you correctly. And
No, it
then
was April 2010. We picked up the first.
2010. All right,
Yeah.
my mistake.
And
And
then
then
sometimes
you had several
I had two
tandem.
Oasises and one Oasis and two Revolutions prior to that. And we've been
Okay.
running those pretty hard for at least a couple years
Yeah,
and traveling and stuff like that. So we ended up buying, the object was to go to one family boat.
yeah.
Instead of, because one thing that I'm the one that loads all the boats, and when you got three boats on the roof,
It's a
it
lot.
takes you a long time to get all three boats all prepped and ready.
Yeah,
So our thought was, let's just load one boat, or we can all pile on it,
yeah,
and it saves me actually, it takes 15 minutes, 20 minutes to set it up, where the other boats were, 5-6 minutes each, but I was there 25 minutes setting up boats.
yeah. And then
So,
just to wrap up
and
the
walking them to the water. So
just to wrap up the introductions here, how many Hobie Tandem Islands did you end up owning over the years?
three. I own
Three.
three. I had a 2010, a 2011, and a 2012.
Okay,
So
pretty rapidly together there.
yeah,
Yeah,
and the first one, I folded the hull on it, and it was in pretty bad shape. And then the second one, I kind of wore it out. And then, because we had, oh my God, we were out every single weekend.
yeah, yeah. And you're
And so,
just to continue with the introductions, you're located still in the Florida area?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
we had a house down in Key West, but we don't go down to that anymore too much,
yeah.
just since 2004. And then we just, we're getting older and things like that. So we mostly live in Sarasota now,
Okay.
and
Yeah,
which is on the West Coast, just south of Tampa.
yeah,
And
yeah. I'm familiar with that. All right, so
the
why don't we stop there? I'll just give a brief introduction for myself, and then we'll get into the next
Sure.
agenda item. So again, Jim Powers, longtime sailor. Like Bob, I kind of started with a sunfish, learning how to sail with our family when I was younger, as a young boy, mostly sailing in saltwater, Long Island Sound in particular. So I was kind of thrown into cold water and pretty rough surf conditions under those scenarios. And then, like Bob, I've had many Hobies. Started with an Outback pedal drive, then went to a Revolution. I bought, I think it was called either the 9. I think there's a was it a 9, 11, and a 13, I think, in the Revolution or something like that. Three different sizes. So I ended up with a small one, and then also the middle one, the 11, I believe. Sold them both. Then I got an Adventure Island. Had that for a year, loved it, but I needed a little more size. That was a 2015, I think, 2014, maybe 2015 Adventure Island. And then I picked up a Hobie Tandem Island. And like Bob, I'm on my third Tandem Island. I went through a 2017 and then a 2019, 2020, and I'm on a 2022, a brand new boat that I just picked up this fall, which is a Hobie Tandem Island. So I've done modifications on each of those, and we'll talk about those in just a minute. I'm located outside of the Philly area, so Northeast U.S. Biochemist by training, so more scientific background, but involved with innovation in the biotech space, making vaccines, gene therapy, all kinds of interesting things over 30 plus years. And like Bob, I traveled the world probably 3 or 4 times also, and been in just about every continent around the world, working all for work. And the other thing I do a lot with is Frisbee and also kite flying. So when I'm not sailing, those are some other things that I do. But today's focus is just on learning more about kind of the Hobie Tandem Island. So that's kind of the introductions. I'd like to go into the second agenda item here, which is really talking about the sailing environment. And I'll just to kind of kick that off, and I'll have Bob share, and I'll share some of my experiences. So I've had a lot of time sailing in a lot of different bodies of water, but mostly coastal conditions. And what I mean by coastal is it's saltwater conditions, primarily tidal bodies of water with strong currents, sometimes rivers with strong currents. Run into some offshore stuff. You run fairly long distances, maybe 30, 40, 50 miles in a day, sometimes more than that. And also under frostbite conditions, as you see here. I just did a frostbite sail last week in Delaware Bay, where the water temperature is in the 30s, and it can be a little bit challenging. You're going to be wearing some safety equipment, dry suits, and things like that. So that's, it's these kind of conditions that kind of drive me to make some improvements to the Hobie Tandem Island, mainly to make it safer and be able to go farther. But let's turn over to Bob and kind of get your experiences. You already shared one about Sarasota and your wife and struggling to get back, fighting against the current. And we'll let Bob answer. But we want to kind of just delve a little bit about, what are some of the water conditions that you routinely sail in or found challenging that maybe drove you to then make some changes to the Hobie Tandem Island?
Well, the biggest thing, I was out every single weekend and the owning the island was part of my exercise program. And so I vowed to the wife, in order to buy the Tandem Island, that I would pedal the boat out 15 miles a week, and as my exercise program, because I had had a heart attack and I was overweight, so I had to have some kind of an exercise program.
Some cardio.
That was the promise, and the first few times out, I had a great difficulty getting 15 miles in. I mean, it was from 9 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock at night. Because one thing I discovered quickly, I do all this stuff, to sell the wife on, was all in theory. And I bought the Tandem Island, and not realizing the actual wind conditions in Sarasota Bay and the Keys in general, South Florida, is the wind. Probably you go out probably 6 times, and 4 of those 6 times the wind is under 5 miles an hour. So
is that year round, or
pardon?
Is that year round, or is it just summertime? It's light winds?
It's year round pretty much. So there's it kicks up a little bit in the fall around October for a few weeks, but year round. And then also the other thing that was significant is it's very hot here, 95 degrees. Highest recorded temperature I think was 96 in Sarasota, and but it never gets above that. You go to Orlando, it gets 115 over there. But we've got
humid.
The ocean to cool us
very
down.
humid, though.
Yeah, it is very humid. And what I discovered is when there's no wind, you don't go anywhere. The sail just flops, and that's it. And then when you're pedaling, you can pedal, at a decent pace up to maybe 2 miles an hour, and that's kind of it. Otherwise, you exhaust yourself out. I was sitting there trying to go, 15 miles. So it's
in a single day trip, 15 miles.
Yeah.
Not 15 miles cumulative for the week. It's 15 miles for that going. Yeah.
So that was my goal, and I sat and got permission to get the boat as my exercise program, and that was it was a kind of canned deal. So the first few times out, that was the first weekend, and then we went out that Thursday and we got stranded offshore, me and the wife, and because the wind died, and we were offshore, oh, probably quarter mile,
Yeah.
and with no wind whatsoever, and the tide was going out. Well, the tide's 6 miles an hour.
Yeah. That tide is
So
the
we
driver.
we were pedaling as much as we could um, to try and get back in Big Pass. And
Yeah.
we ended up, was the 3 hour tour like on Gilligan's
Yeah.
Island was
Yeah.
like six
You're on
hours
it.
and totally exhausted. So and then the next day, Friday, I ended up going out by myself, and exactly the same thing happened.
Mm.
The wind died, and I couldn't get ashore. I was offshore, being blown out to sea, and I couldn't get back offshore. So that was on the Friday. So I decided, well, there's something has to be done. So that weekend, I bought a motor, put it up.
Day 3.
I built a big spinnaker sail and a jib sail, and put them on the boat. Built my mast topper. Took me an hour and a half to make the mast topper, and I put on the made a motor mount. That took maybe an hour and a half to make the motor mount. And that same motor mount, the same mast topper, I used on every single boat from there in. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. But
uh,
amazing that the those 2 sails where you got stuck offshore, that you immediately took action within a few days to rectify that with increasing and changing the sail plan, putting a motor mount on, and sticking a motor on it, I suspect.
yeah, and well, the just by happenstance, we had probably 5 or 6 of those Hobie kayak sails,
Yeah.
uh, just
Those
sitting in the
small
garage.
ones. Yeah.
Yeah, the small Hobie.
Yeah.
They're, I don't know
I
how
got one in
many.
my garage right now.
Yeah, and because we did that like crazy. Whenever we'd go out, we'd always have the kayak sails furled up and
Yeah.
lashed to the side of the boat, because
Yeah.
we loved the kayak sailing. And the revos, we'd be out, every single before we got the TI, we'd be out every single weekend, all
Wow.
weekend long, and with kayaking, but we'd be looking to kayak sail. So we had 2 years experience kayak
Yeah.
sailing. We just
Yeah.
loved it. So
Yeah. I had the same. I had bought that sail for the Outback,
mhm.
and then I used it on the Rev, but it was too tippy for me because there was no outriggers. At least the one I did, it was just it's kind
Right,
of
right.
it could be tippy with just that sail. But
Oh, yeah, but the water in Sarasota is 95 degrees, so
yeah,
it's kind of a
that's
given. You're going to tip over a lot.
yeah. All right, well keep going there. We were just
Yeah,
talking about
so
the water
then
conditions.
I by the probably 2 weeks later, I had the boat pretty much refined, so I couldn't get stuck offshore.
Yeah,
If the wind died, I had the motor. If it got too windy, offshore wind,
yeah,
the I didn't know that if the wind is blowing offshore, you don't go sailing, period. I
yeah,
didn't know that. So
yeah.
I just thought that
Got to stay real close to shore if you do that.
yeah, yeah, the you can, and because I several times I got blown out
Yeah,
into the Gulf
Gulf of
and was
Mexico. Yeah.
blown away. And the same thing down in Key West.
Hmm.
It's extremely dangerous down there, because if the north's coming from the wind is coming from the north to the south, and it's just a tiny island there,
Yeah,
and you get and there's a big flaw in the Tandem Island in the way that if you're going against the wind,
there's trouble.
um, and the wind is above a certain amount, you get blown away from shore,
Yeah,
and there is no physical way that you can get back
no,
to
without
the
some
against the
external help.
currents
Yeah,
and the
yeah,
wind.
yeah. It could
So
be dangerous. Yeah,
yeah, it's very dangerous.
yeah.
You all
So
you
those
know
are so what you're describing are some of the water conditions that you faced in the Florida area, and certainly I've had similar experiences on up and down the East Coast, where you get into those challenging conditions that can make it unsafe if you don't have some way to escape from those conditions. And
Right. And
I think
and then
that's
another factor in that was the pointing ability of the Tandem Island was just
poor.
awful.
Yeah.
It was
What
horrible.
would you? I would say it's probably like 45 to 50 degrees off
45 to
the wind.
50 degrees. And then when the wind's over a certain amount, though, what you lose in when you're at that angle, what you lose. So you end up tacking like crazy. You're moving like crazy, but
Not making any
you're
progress.
not making there's a certain term for it um for how much forward progress you're
Yeah,
making through
yeah,
the
very
tack.
little. Yeah.
And
I
and
know the mono holes, a good mono hole can get, 30 degrees off the wind, maybe even less than that. But the multi holes generally as a rule don't point as well into the wind.
right. Yeah.
And certainly
Mine
the hook.
easily, the final designs would go upwind 10 degrees off the point.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We want to get into
No
that for
problems
sure.
at all.
Yeah.
And I could actually go completely against the wind, straight dead on, but I wasn't getting any assistance from the
Yeah.
sail. But 10 degrees was pretty
Yeah.
much, I've got tons of videos showing that where I was 10, 15
Yeah,
degrees
well,
off.
let's get into that here in just a second. I'm going to just stop for a second, just for people maybe are not familiar with the Hobie Tandem Island, and just looking at this picture you see on the screen, just for the newbies, the Hobie Tandem Island is a tri-hull setup, a trimaran. Basically, it's a center kayak with two outriggers. The outriggers are called amas. The bars that hold them out are called the akas. It has a retractable rudder. It has a furling mainsail that you see here. It goes up 18 and a half feet, has a center hatch in the bow. And in this particular case, it has a motor mount that I put on the back with an outboard motor, Suzuki 2.5 horsepower, outboard motor. And we'll get into, Bob, some of your modifications here in just a minute. So let's go ahead to the next agenda item to keep us on track here. We talked about the water requirements. Now let's take a look at in particular, some of the specific modifications that you've already mentioned, a number of them, but let's go a little bit deeper on those. And I'm going to bring up, let me see, I think I have it here as one of the slides. Just bear with me a second. I think it might be this one. Yes. So if you could use this image here and kind of just walk us through some of the changes that you've made, and then I'll try and annotate, just spotlight some of the areas that you're talking about. So I don't know if you want to go talk about them.
Yeah, start at the left corner there.
Yeah.
That was probably 2 weeks after I bought the boat, realizing it could have been 3 weeks or so, but realizing that I needed to have more. These are some of the modifications, from actual use in the near ocean and in the Gulf,
All right. So it
and then
looks like
also the obligation to
the
get
main
the
one was you added some additional sails here. So this is like a foresail.
yeah, yeah. The first one there is a real puffy spinnaker,
Mm-hmm.
like a G2, I guess you'd call it, and that was to give me better downwind, because another thing that I figured out real fast was that the downwind performance of the boat was terrible, because the main sail would turn into like a taco shell,
Yeah.
and you just couldn't go downwind very good.
Right.
So
Yeah. The other thing to point out is these tandem islands do not have a boom on them. The
correct.
stock tandem islands, because it's a roller reefing mainsail, and that's why it kind of turns into that taco kind of when you go downwind with
Right.
no boom to hold it out.
And then
Right.
another feature of that is that the main sail on the boat is mounted so far forward on the boat that what happens is when you pull that spinnaker up and you're sailing with it and you've got a good wind and a tailwind on you, the front of the boat actually submerges underneath the water. I called it submarine mode.
Yeah, yeah.
And it doesn't slow you down at all. You just continue, but the bow of the boat's underwater.
Man,
So
it's like a plow, and that does,
yeah.
you know, impede your
So
progress somewhat. Yeah.
yeah, and it's the reason for that is because the mainsail is mounted only maybe 4.5, 5 feet from the front of the boat. And it gives you it just the downward force from the sails trying to propel you
Yeah.
that drives the bow underwater.
Yeah. And then the sail modifications that you made here for this jib, was it a line running from the bow up to the mast, and did you have a stay to the back at this point in time? Or
Yeah,
was that
there's
later?
every design I had because another thing that
Sorry, I
happened
don't know
was
the answer to this one, but I'm learning.
Go ahead. I had to repeat that, please.
okay. The the what happened was when I first built the spinnaker, the forward force on the of the sail pushing the tip of the mast forward
Yeah.
snapped the rivet. There's a bolt in
The
the
bottom.
hull of the boat,
Yeah.
and I snapped about 5 of those rivets, the bolts
Yeah. Yeah. The
at the
mast
base of the boat.
retainer bolt at the bottom.
Yeah.
And
So I
Hobie did make
analyzed
a,
it all being an engineer,
yeah.
and I realized that the design wasn't designed to be able to have any forward force.
Yeah.
So I had to incorporate a stay line at the back
Yeah.
in order to contain that forward force. Never broke a bolt stud after I installed
Stay line.
the stay lines.
Yeah. Yeah. I've snapped that bolt once on a earlier Tandem Island. Hobie changed the design on that, I think in 2016 or 17, to go to a 5/16 inch bolt
Mhm.
from a 1/4 inch bolt that it used to be, because they did have other sailors that snapped that bolt, not just you and I. All right, and let's talk about let's just kind of go through the rest of these on this
Okay. Well,
infographic.
the mast topper in the upper right corner, I built that the very first weekend. Um, and basically what that is just a piece of pipe and a steel rod about 3 feet long. And then I used the exact design that they had in the down at the bottom of the mast. That's what they call a pin bearing.
Mhm.
And all watches have those. It's the least amount of friction from a bearing surface called a pin bearing.
So when
And
you
the
talk about the pin bearing, is that those little balls that go around the mast receiver at the bottom?
no, down at the very bottom of the boat,
Okay.
there's a pin sticking up at the
Yeah.
very bottom of the boat.
Yeah.
And the bottom of the mast plugs into that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is called a pin bearing.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
the distance between that pin bearing and the ball bearings about 10 inches, 12 inches higher
Yeah.
is it gives you the leverage and the freewheeling ability of the mast
Yeah.
to be able to spin it even under load.
So on the
So
Hobie, on the top of the mast up here, if I were to draw it, it's kind of, this is the mast coming up cross section, and then the sail fits like in a little loop at the top up here. It's like a loop that the sail slides over. But right at the tip of that mast is where you put in this fits on top of there.
Yeah, and the mast topper it's not inserted, but it's about probably 7, 8 inches tall. I use the same distance as Hobie uses at the base to do
Yeah.
my pin
And
bearing.
so 7, 8 inches, you're talking about this dimension here.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it goes down about 7 inches and it goes into a chamfered opening, like just a chamfer, a pin going into a chamfer.
Yeah.
And the way that works is it least amount of resistance to rotation. So, and then the distance between that and the bearings was like about 7 inches. Now
So
on,
this 7-inch piece then fit into, this is the chamfer that you're referring to here?
yeah, the chamfer was way down in the bottom, and basically I had a insert down, just a piece of polyethylene
Mhm,
slug that had the chamfer in it,
mhm,
and then the pin
mhm.
slid into that, and that
Uh,
was my pin bearing.
Yeah, so that
And then the
slips.
main bearings were, I didn't use anything fancy. I just had actually it was a sink tube, 12 inches tall, brass.
Mhm,
And then I just had a loose fitting, like plastic sleeve that went into it.
mhm.
And that was the,
That
like
was the
the roller
bearing.
bearings in the
Yeah,
thing. I didn't feel like making roller bearings.
yeah,
So, because as seldom as you spin it under load, most of the time you point into the wind,
yeah,
and then you spin the mainsail in and out,
yeah.
pointed into the wind. And so
So
you're
this
not
sits
trying to
on top of the mast right here. And then you had two pieces of it, just a long section on top of here. You tacked the, I guess, the backstay on the back end and
Yeah,
looked like
it
you
was
had
just
some,
clipped on, and then all of the lines were enclosed in 3/8 water tubing, PVC water tubing, so they
yeah,
wouldn't get tangled in the mainsail. That keeps
yeah,
it from
yeah,
getting tangled.
yeah, because on the
So,
front of
and
this,
then
you
it's
had,
also a
looks like,
lot easier when you're setting up. Is there's a joint in the middle? You just fold it in half, the stay, and you don't have to worry about untangling lines, and then it just works on just stainless clips. You just
yeah.
set it up, hoist it, and
Mhm.
clip a clip, and
So
use
you
that
had this backstay was really a line within the tube.
within a tube. Yeah, and and it had a joint in the middle where you broke the joint, so it
Yeah, so you
folded
could
in
fold
half.
it,
Then the
fold
whole
it.
thing just lays on the boat for
Yeah, I was
transport.
wondering about when you mounted the mast, when you stepped the mast, you got to be able to lift this extra line and the topper, and it looks
Yeah,
like,
and those lines are the tubings. There's actually three lines up there. One for
yeah,
the
once you go with these three lines that we see, and once you just start with the one closest to the bow, I guess would be this one. What's the purpose of that? What's the purpose of this
that
one?
one is for the spinnaker. That's the
Yeah,
halyard for the spinnaker, and
okay,
the
yeah,
one in the middle is the halyard for the jib.
yeah.
Because all the sails were rotor furling, and
Except for the spinnaker. Yeah. Or was the spinnaker rolling furling?
no, the spinnaker. Well, the earliest version of the one that I did, like the first week, I just kept in a bag.
Yeah,
Uh, and I called it a parachute bag or something like that.
yeah, yeah,
And then I would clip it on, but you needed the stay lines on the very front for when you
yeah,
hoisted the sail.
yeah. You
So,
hosted up this line here.
and then all those lines are dangling once you hoist the sail up,
Yeah,
and then put it into the hole. And then you just grab those lines and then clip them
yeah,
to clips down in the hull.
yeah,
It took maybe 10 minutes more, 15 minutes more to set up with the
yeah,
exotic sail setup.
yeah. All right, so you got the spinnaker, you got a large jib, and then this third line, was that just the halyard, or what was this third line here?
That's the halyard for the jib.
Okay,
That
for the
that
jib.
right there, that's
Yeah,
the halyard for the jib.
yeah. And then
And
this is the jib itself,
that's the jib itself.
which
So
all,
basically, if I needed to stop for a bridge or go, because we did a lot of kayaking
mhm,
from parks that were near shore.
mhm.
And so
Dip under
you'd
the
have to set
bridges.
up the whole boat, at the camping ground. you
Yeah.
know, and then follow a little river out, you know, maybe
Yeah.
a quarter mile or half
Yeah.
mile, and you'd have to go underneath all the bridges. So
Yeah.
you start out the day with all your sails laying down on the
Yeah.
hull,
Yeah.
and with the AMAs swung in,
Yeah.
and then you make your way out to the ocean. Then once you're out there, then you lift your mainsail,
Yeah.
and then you hoist the jib and the
Yeah.
spinnaker.
Yeah.
So you just hoist, because they were just laying down on the hull. They stay permanently on the boat. I never took them off ever.
Yeah. And
They
then when
just,
you're
I
out
just
and like you
roll
said,
them up,
yeah.
and then when it's time to go home, I just lower the halyard that would lay against the bolt,
Yeah.
the boat, and they were never removed. Neither the spinnaker or the
Yeah.
jib were never removed from the boat.
Always attached. Yeah. All right. Well, that gives us a good idea of the sail plan, and certainly increased the overall sail square footage, as you mentioned here, to 265. So that really boosted the total sail power. Why don't you talk a little bit about, I know in this diagram, you can number of other changes that were made. And why don't we just talk maybe about the motors that you put on the back? I know you had twin Hondas, I believe, at one point. But
Later on, yeah,
yeah, just
that was
talk.
the first motor I bought. The one I got was the only one I could find on a day's notice. I started looking at it for it Friday night, and then I had it because I had permission to buy it,
There you
and
go.
you know, from the wife, because I exhausted her, and so to vow that it would never happen again, I promised a motor. So that's the only one I could get. I looked around just a little bit, and it ended up being not very good motor. You know, it's
Yeah.
just terrible. So
So what was after this week of rapid metamorphosis of this boat? What was it like the first couple times you took it out on the water?
did they well the first time I took it out on the water after I did all the other stuff, the nose started diving on downwinds. I just happened to have a bunch of family come down from up north, and I wanted to show off, so I took them all out sailing. And we got into a downwind, and the bow dove down because we had the boat overloaded. There's 5 people in the boat to
Yeah,
begin
yeah.
with, and
So it's low in the water.
it was low in the water. And then as soon as that spinnaker and jib went out, I had the spinnaker and jib out in a gull wing, and then the big spinnaker way out, puffed out front. And we were doing pretty good, but the bow went completely underwater, and didn't slow us down at all. It was annoying.
Yeah.
And so that's when I started thinking about it. And that's when I added the hydrofoils to the barrage drive. Those pink things are actually for doing, I used to restore, I've owned a lot of sports cars and restored them all.
Yeah.
And those were just sitting around the garage. They're for applying Bondo. And I just modified a few of those so that when the pedals were up, parked up against the hull,
Yeah.
what it did was it angled the fins of the Mirage drive 10 degrees. So it would
Okay.
raise the bow of the boat up
Yeah.
so it would sink. And then I built those in a weekend. And that solved the problem temporarily, you know, so I just kept it, and they didn't interfere with the pedaling of the boat in any way, shape, or form.
Huh.
And they didn't really do much more drag or anything like that. So
So
what
just
you
kind of
did was
lifted up the
if
bow.
you were sailing and your bow dipped, what you did was you just put your foot forward on
Yeah.
the barrage drive and maybe
Yeah.
put bungee on it,
Yeah.
and the bow would come back out, you know, once you're
Oh.
underway. You know, you have to have
And,
forward speed for all that to work.
and are these the hydrofoils you're referring to? Or is this something different?
Oh no, that I had full hydrofoils on the boat, but that was during the crazy time.
Yeah.
So
And
that
then,
was around 2011, 2012.
yeah. So you mounted a motor back here, as you can see. You got the expanded sail plan, and this is, I guess, an early version 1 of
Yeah,
your
that's
modification.
my original boat, the 2000. That's the one that I folded the hull
Yeah.
on at the hatch.
Because the hatch is a weak spot when you got, I
Yeah,
guess this is pulling up and you got all kinds of forces going on. It's not meant to
yeah, and
handle.
that the bow of that boat would wave up and down with that sail plan, would wave up and down around 5-6 inches, literally.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and it finally gave out after a while. So,
And what was that like when it actually gave out? Were you out on the water, and how did you recover?
well, it's the polyethylene. It doesn't really break,
It just
but once
bends.
it gives, you got like a kink and a weak spot
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's
So
once it
after a
kinked,
sail, you came back with a few kinks in the bow, I
yeah, it
guess.
had a
Yeah.
kink in the hull, and the whole damage was not recoverable.
Yeah.
You know, it's like when you bend a piece of aluminum,
Yeah.
you bend it back and forth. It's really kind of hard, but after 5 bends, it's like really
Starts to break.
easy, and then
Yeah.
all of a sudden it breaks.
Yeah.
So that's the way these hulls are too. So
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I think you had the 20-pound emergency motor with 40 miles of fuel. So that gave you more range and
and
helped you
that
run
was just in case,
yeah.
just because we were also going offshore a lot down in we'd spend about 1 week a month at our house in Key West, and then the other 3 weeks up here.
Yeah.
So we'd take that with us always,
Yeah.
and we kept it on the roof because there's no parking down in Key West.
Yeah.
It's like 2 something an hour to
Yeah.
park, and then if you got a trailer, that's 2 something an hour more.
Yeah. And you're not on the water for 2 something an hour more than for that. Yeah.
Right.
I hear you. And how about the stern here with you made some modifications here for, I
Yeah,
guess,
that
riser in the
was
back,
it went into
scupper
the
hole,
rod
rod
holders.
holders. Yeah.
We don't fish at all. So
Hmm.
when I got that motor that first weekend, I whipped that on Friday night. I just took some PVC tubing, stuck it into the rod holders, and then I took some steel that I got at Home Depot and just made, I'm a design engineer, I'm an engineer, so I can engineer things quickly and
Hmm.
easily that I know are going to work, when they're
Yeah.
complete, because I take into account all the stresses and forces of everything
Yeah.
when I'm designing, but
Sure.
I designed it in an hour. So I designed that motor mount, and the reason that the PVC tubing goes way up is because my wife was in the back seat and she kept on having her neck
Yeah.
in the way
Slap
of
with the
the
main sheet.
main sheet. So
Yeah.
I added that little riser there to kind of raise that main sheet up a little bit. That helped a little bit, but
Yeah.
one downside to that is that the main sheet and the sail is designed for a certain sail form and
Yeah.
forces from certain directions.
Yeah.
When you raise that rear
Changes it. Yeah.
lineup, it changes the whole
Shape of the
characteristics of
sail.
the sail.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
lose
I've
like a third of
explored,
its power.
I know many people have done the risers with the Hobie Tandem Islands, but I do sail from the back near 100% of the time. But I chose not to put a riser in because it just changed the shape of the sail too much.
Yeah.
In
What
my
I ended up doing is eventually I went to the very tail stern of the boat
Hmm.
and ran the turnbuckle way
Mhm.
back there. I just took 2 pieces of Spectra and wrapped them around that Spectra is like 300-400 pound test,
Yeah.
and wrapped them around the rudder, the thing that it's called the estrussion, I think, for
The
the rudder.
gungeon. There's a gungeon
Yeah.
that the
And,
rudder
and,
is attached
and I
to.
wrapped around that, and then I
Mhm.
just hooked my my for the
Turnbuckle or
sail
whatever.
turn line way
Yeah.
back there. That brought it
Okay.
back about 1.5 foot, and that helped
Yeah.
on this head clearance a little bit.
Okay,
And it
yeah.
also helped on the keeping
Shape
the
of the
sail
sail.
form closer to
Yeah.
its original. So
Something I
this,
might have to look at. Yeah. And then on the bow, I know, and later iterations you had built a reinforced bow.
yeah.
But how about on this early version?
Yeah, what I did, was I used the forces of that's just like 800-pound test like strapping material,
Yeah.
and I just worked out a way to get it so that I could withstand the force without pulling that
Yeah, the
the
bow,
little knob off.
yeah, the
I
ring on the
pulled
bow,
one of them
pulling
off.
that out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's
So
just an
so I
eyelet.
came up worked with quite a few different versions
Yeah.
of that because I had they had the big 135-foot spinnaker on there, and plus a jib. There was a lot of force on that bow.
Yeah.
Coming all
Yeah, for
places.
sure. Let me, I think we want to just show this video. This kind of shows maybe version 3 of your design. Is this the later version, correct? With a
Yeah, this is
wing sail
this is
and
actually when I bought my uh 2012 Ti. Uh this is taken right around 2013, and all the modifications that I did previously, all just when I sold the second boat, I just put all that stuff in the garage, waiting till because I thought I was going to get transferred to Phoenix, Arizona, and there's no water there, so I sold the boat. But then about probably 3-4 months later, they called off me and having to move to Phoenix. So so I went and bought another boat, and all the parts I just had sitting in the garage, they all just bolt right on.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I was able to quickly just get going again. So
So
this
let's
is that.
just watch this video, right?
Yeah.
7-minute
Yeah.
video. And I think you're speaking on this one.
Yes.
And we can just listen along. And if you want to pause it at some point to explain something, just wave your hand and I'll just hit the pause button and then you
Okay.
can talk over the top of that. So let's go.
Okay.
Stuff I have on my Tandem Island to kind of prepare it for scuba diving, which is our main pastime. Couple little things that I've done.
Let me just pause it here just to confirm. Can you hear yourself speaking on the
Yes.
YouTube? Okay,
Yeah.
good. And is there anything you want to talk about before we continue the video here?
Yeah, well, let me describe first the setup here. We use the boat extensively way offshore for scuba diving, mostly off of Key West. And we would take it out, and we'd usually carry 2 scuba tanks with us to whenever we went out, because we'd go out for the day.
Yeah.
And so those straps that are laying on the top of the trampoline, those are the straps that hold the scuba tanks down to the AKA bars.
Yeah.
That's where we strap them down at. So
Yeah.
we'd have two scuba tanks on each side strapped to the AKA bars.
Yeah. Okay, good. And then and just for the newbies here, these black bars are the AKA or AKA bars. And these are the AMAs or AMAs that are the outriggers on both sides. And then you can see
Well, let me quickly describe the safety features here.
yeah, got
If you
the
look on that's the what we call the what do you call it, the
I
zero
could call that keep out lines
keep out
or
lines. That's the actual keep out lines on
Yeah.
that we had on the boat right at that time.
it looks like you
And
put a eyelet in here.
no, that came with the boat.
Ah, okay. The newer boats
Those
don't have that.
eyelets used to come with that.
Yeah, the
So
new ones don't have that.
yeah. And
I
that
just
was
tie it
very
to here.
sturdy. It was equal quality to the ones on the bow and the stern. So.
Okay.
And then over on the, if you look at the AKA bar, just right to the right, that is very significant right there. The connections, see the way the straps, there's double bungees there. And
Yeah.
then there's little pieces of spectra there that the spectra is like 300 pounds test.
Yeah.
But then at the lower right one, you can just barely see a little piece of string that goes up and gets hooked up to the, and what that is that's a safety spray.
Okay. In case this pops out.
In case the AKA, because if those bars pop out, you go over. So and then when you're out in rough seas, because a lot of times we're out there, the waves are a foot, 2 feet. The boat is rocking, and those AKAs rattle, and then they can rattle enough that they fall off the end. So you almost have to have at least double bungees on there. But that safety string keeps them from ever having any possibility of falling off. So when we were diving, we would sit on these AMAs to go and launch. We could actually, I could have 4 people sitting on the AMAs, with their knees in the water. They were that strong. So and we could easily, with the reinforced trampolines, we could easily 300-pound person with full tanks and full gear on could walk around on that, right?
Okay, yeah. And while we're here, why don't we, and I think you might speak about this, but you also reinforce the Aka bars and lengthen them, I think.
Not in this version. This was taken around 2013. So I haven't widened the boat yet.
Okay.
But
all right, let's give the video a run here.
Okay.
I'll restart the video. Let me just turn off the animation so I can restart the video.
Yeah, it explains a lot of this stuff in the video.
Let me go back up to here. 1 second. Annotate. All right. So let's start again.
Cause problems is these crazy straps here. They continuously break. So I added cords inside and little 89-cent S hooks to make it so I can sit and walk around on the tramps without any fear of actually when this occurred, the first 3 straps broke and I went in the water and the boat almost sailed away from me. So I rigged this up. The other side only just has a couple of the S hooks. It has the regular straps, but they're just short loops just for safety. If the straps do break, then you at least don't go in the water. We also have a rope ladder for the boat that basically allows you to climb up onto the TI. Plus we have double bungees on here, and I just use Spectra string. And then this little feature here makes it so the bungee can't possibly pull out more than a certain amount. So when I have divers sitting on the AMAs, there's no issues. The AMAs don't come off or anything like that. And actually, I always have snorkelers just sitting on the AMAs all the time. I only have one on each side of that safety strap. I don't have anything on the front. And then to keep the AMAs from folding in, I have this 1/4 inch line that goes back and just clips in here. That stays in the boat all the time. It's incorporated into the spray skirts. So the spray skirts are extra super heavy duty, so you can actually sit on them if you want and climb into the boat over the spray skirts. You can also store gear up there, but you don't want too much weight up here. Everything is always lashed and strapped. This little clip here is for my hydrofoils along with those red bands, but I never use the hydrofoils, so I just using the clip. everything's kind of hooked to the bowsprit, which is really old and ratty now. It's over 4 years old, so, but it's still going strong. Then I have the same thing on this side. This is just an example. There's mask and fins. There's a dive bag. Here's a BC. We usually go out with at least two tanks each, and both of our BCs. So everything's just lashed down. So if anything happens, you know, it comes off. These are the little safety straps here on this side. They're just little pieces of cord that are hooked onto the S-clips. I have S-clips everywhere, but I only have 3 of them on there. And it's optional. If nobody plans on sitting on this one, I don't even hook them up. So, and then, you know, everybody has issues with the rudder pins breaking and stuff. So what I do is I have twin engines, obviously. What I do is I keep this motor rigged with a handle, and basically what I do is just take this off, sit in the back seat, and then steer with the tiller if my rudder happens to fail and I'm out in the water. And if weather comes up and I'm trying to outrun a thunderstorm or something, what I'll do is I'll just put the sails down, drop both motors in the water, and get out of Dodge as quick as I can. 99% of the time, I just have the motors locked straight, and this is just to create less turbulence, because the motors are designed to go behind a transom on a boat. So that's nothing. And then this is the planing hull mod that I made. Unless you're planning on going fast, not really worthwhile making. Yeah, the ladder just stows on the boat permanently, and basically it's just wrapped around this and then looped. That's it. That's all there is for the ladder, and that holds enough to hold a 200-pound diver with his tanks on, and they can climb up on the boat. Most of the time, though, we take our BCs off. Then if we're going to go back in, we just clip them somewhere, and then leave the tanks with the BCs floating in the water. And then we hand them up when we're all done. Oh, these straps here are just so I don't usually take them along if we're not diving. But what I do is I take 1 or 2 tanks on each side and just lash them to this back bar. The weight's far enough back that it's not that big a deal. But you know, if we're going out, you know, far offshore off Key West, typically what we'll do is we have a 4-person life raft that we tow behind about 15-20 feet straight behind the boat. It doesn't affect steering or anything, so it works out well. And then if we have additional divers, they'll ride along on our inflatable kayaks and then just hang on to the dinghy in the back. And then what we'll do is we'll load all of our coolers and dive gear, tanks, and everything into the dinghy and just float it. You can't tell it's back there, even when it's full. So. Then what else? Here's my jib sail. It's about 1.5 years old now, and it's starting to look pretty ratty. You know, but it's got a heck of a lot of hours on it, and a lot of miles. The only control for it is this line right here. You just, you know, it follows the wind like a wind vane. Then when you want to engage it, you just pull it to one side or the other, and it creates a vacuum in front of the boat and pulls the boat along. If I'd have known that you have to have a certain amount of forward motion for that to even work, I wouldn't have put it on. I don't use the spinnaker very much anymore. We're planning on going down to Key West soon, so I'm getting that all rigged. That's about it. Anybody sees that?
All right, let me pause it there. Anything else, Bobby, you want to add that we just didn't cover in the video so far?
No, that's pretty much it. The one thing about the motors, this is after my wild days, so I didn't have these motors all souped up. I had them souped up at one time to 7, 8 horse each. And that was when I was trying to use my hydrofoils. And but these are more tuned. I used to be a motorhead, so these are more tuned as a hybrid for super mileage.
Mhm.
And there is super high pitch props.
Yeah, I was going to say those
That,
props look different.
yeah, they aren't stock props. They're hand built, and they're like around the. I think the stock prop is about 4.5 pitch, somewhere
Mhm.
around there. These are about 8 pitch,
Yeah, I was going to
so
say it
they're
looks more
much
aggressive.
higher. So way more aggressive, and the boat will top out right around 15. With those props. And I had another set for hydrofoiling that were 10 pitch props.
Uh,
That's why I had to up the horsepower a little bit. And those 10 pitch props would get me up a little over 20. And then, when you're foiling, you want to be up over 20. So
yeah, yeah. And then for just regular going offshore scuba diving, you would typically run these motors at like half speed. Do
yeah,
you go,
about quarter throttle works
yeah,
about
quarter
20.
throttle. And then
Yeah,
what kind of range were you getting with these?
you get a 60 miles to a gallon, and you got quarter-gallon tanks, and then so that gets you, and then I'd have an extra gallon of gas that I carry
Yeah.
along, so that gives me right around 100 miles.
And what
So
would be a tip? I know you spent a lot of time doing these scuba trips out offshore for various dives. What would be an average distance you would be covering on a given trip?
probably 7 to 8 miles out.
Yeah,
So because it's to Sand Key, which is that area is the place where we almost always dived.
yeah.
And there's a place west of there called the Rocks.
Mhm.
And if you go to Sand Key, you can't spearfish,
Mm,
but the Rocks you can.
mm.
And it's similar landscape, like the coral reef, but
Mhm.
it's just not protected. So
Yeah.
um
So a
so
typical trip
we
might
would go
be
there.
all up at the end of the day. It might be something like 30 miles, 40 miles.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do, because everything's a roundabout way. When
Yeah.
when you got to depend on the wind a little bit, and then from where you launch. So we'd probably get around, probably take about 7 miles, and then if we were spearfishing, you got a limit um, on how long you can spearfish in a certain spot, about 20
Mm,
to 30 minutes. And
mm.
then the bullhead sharks, I think they're
Yeah.
called. They
Come
start
in.
poking at your trampolines, trying to eat you. Because they smell the fish. They
Yeah.
smell it from miles away, and
Yeah.
then they come in. So you can only spearfish for maybe 20, 30 minutes, and you got to leave that area. So
Yeah. Because the sharks start coming in.
the
Uh,
sharks come in, and
yeah.
they're not the whitetails or anything like that. These are
Aggressive.
the really first ones. So
Yeah. Yeah. You got to watch out for those. All right. So let's escape out of this video and let's go back to, I think we had some looks on the Hobie forum here. And for those that are just, I went back to the photo bucket. For those that are listening on the YouTube replay of this, there's a Hobie forum that you see here. And if I move us over to this side for a moment here. So there's a Hobie forum that where all of this stuff is documented in great depth. And actually, as we mentioned, Fusion Engineering is the. Can you still hear me? I'm getting a.
yes,
Okay, it's flashing on the screen. I'm getting this that I'm got it muted. But this is where you'll find all the documentation that it spans 35 pages of information, and this started back I guess in January of 2011 was the first post, and this spans all the way up to 2021 with feedback and evolution of additional ideas that have spanned through here. And I'm not going to look at all 35 pages, but I will say, Bob, if there's any particular area that you want to take a look at, I know you provided.
Well, a lot of it was responding to questions and answers.
Yeah.
That was my Oasis, what you see there from 2008, that I had all rigged up prior to getting to Tandem Island in 2010.
Yeah. So it's almost a
you know,
good precursor of
yeah.
I see the weight you use in the keel here. But are there any, just looking at the number of pages that we have here from 1 to 35, is there any of those you want to just randomly look at, or is there any specific ones you want to highlight, or can we just leave it here to say people go look on their own?
Yeah, they just kind of roll through, and then when it gets interesting, you know, you read on. But most of it was all in response to questions from other people. So, you know, this is how to do a keel weight, and
yeah. So there was a lot of like you said, response to questions where you provided, you know, some additional information, as we see here, to help people understand your design, because I think several people tried to get in and replicate some of it. I'm not going to look at every one of these pages. I'm just kind of giving people a taste. That the best way I could describe it, there's a wealth of information that comes out of these question and answers that covers, you know, subjects that we haven't touched on yet, where you can see additional, you know, detail about how some of these designs came to life. And let me just jump somewhere closer to the end. And again, you car top this, I guess, is another key point for those.
Yeah, for several reasons. The one reason was down in Key West, there's no parking, and our house only had limited parking, so we couldn't really get a trailer down there and still be able to park. And then any place down there, it's like paid parking, and you have to pay $2 something an hour. And then also when we travel a great deal.
You mentioned that you traveled a great deal, 250,000 miles. What would be some of the highlights, just to touch on some of the areas or geography of where you traveled with the Tandem Island?
Well,
what
we've
bodies
been
of
to
water?
all the national parks, pretty much. And we've been
so like national parks, you could go, and if they had a body of water, you could take the Tandem Island and sail in it.
Yeah, and just take the Tandem Island and go.
Wow.
And
Did you ever sail in Yellowstone?
No, we didn't. Because that's in the mountains, and we ended up having to leave the TI. We were right at the max weight of the car with the camper.
Okay,
and we had to leave the Tandem Island in a rental storage.
Okay, because
in
you
order to
couldn't get up the
climb
mountains.
Yeah, to climb the mountains to get to
Yeah.
Yellowstone. So unfortunately we had to store it, and then on the way back we swung up and picked it up. So that's the only place that I ever got. But probably half the time when we were out and about, that's what we call it, traveling. We would only use just the kayak portion. And just kayak, and we did a lot of rapids. That was our favorite thing to do, was run in rapids with this. And we ran quite a number of rapids around the country.
And when with the center hole of the Tandem Island, you'd be running the rapids. Did you keep the rudder up and the the Mirage drives out and just paddle?
Actually, no. We ran it with the Mirage drives in.
Wow.
And we just kept them folded up against the hull, and they never got hurt.
I'm glad you didn't get any damage there. That's great.
Yeah. Well, we did damage them once in a while. We'd have to, you know, those I call the fins a consumable.
I've consumed a few of those in my day. So I would agree with you. I've consumed a few of those.
No, well, a lot of times we would remove the mirage drives and the rudder and just use the paddles if it
Yeah.
was really rough.
Let's talk
Uh,
about your jib here, because you had a special design here. This almost had
It's a
ribs like
wing
an
sail.
airplane wing, right?
Yeah, and
And
it works on a parafoil
yeah,
theory, where basically what it does is the front of it fills with air and makes it hard, as your forward
yeah,
motion.
it
And
inflates.
then basically what it is, it's when it's just sitting in its natural form, it's an asymmetrical shape. That means it has the puff out. It's about 5 inches thick, five
Yeah,
or 6 inches thick,
across
and
the
so
chord
it,
of the sail here. Yeah,
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 and about a third of the way back is where it's at its widest. So it's a classic airplane wing shape,
yeah,
but
yeah.
not an airplane. It's both sides are the same.
Yeah, I was gonna
So
say both sides are the same. So either tack, it would take the outside of the sail would assume the shape of the airplane wing, and the underside would collapse
from
in.
the air pressure
Yeah,
on the inside, because you have air pressure on the inside, that would collapse the
yeah,
wing, so it flattens out. So
yeah,
you end up with a real actual concave airplane wing shape, where
yeah.
it's
And what were
scoped.
these ribs made out of? Give us an idea how you built this.
Well, on that version, this is a very, very early version. We actually had scales, like a measuring tape,
Yeah,
like the pocket tape,
yeah,
that's steel,
yeah.
and we made little slits, and we put that in there,
Ah,
and what it does is it kept it in its shape.
yeah.
And I
And I see
I
you have a line on the back with some attachments here pulling it out, I guess.
Yeah, and what that is that's a tensioner
Hmm.
that tensions it to up to the top, and then it uses leverage to keep it tensioned in the center. And
Yeah,
then this is like the spar on a sailboat,
yeah,
that basically keeps it all, so it's all taut and keeps its shape.
yeah. And it looks like a roller reefing on the bottom here.
Yeah, it's a roller reefing sail.
So this, even though you had this firm measuring tape stuff in here, you could still roll it up.
Yeah, the measuring tape stuff was just on the very surface, but the reason I used it is because it just rolls up just like it does inside the measuring tape.
Yeah, the measuring tape rolls up.
Yeah.
And then the I call it the boom on this jib, for lack of a better term, this metal bar going across here. So when you wanted to roll a reef, you just release the tension on the,
Just release the clip, and then you
yeah.
roll or reef it, and then it just coils up just like a
Wow.
regular jib.
And then
Um,
this design, would you say this is one of the major contributors for you be able to go, 10 degrees off the wind when you're
yeah,
pushing it with
that's
motors?
the main reason that I
Yeah.
can go 10 degrees off the wind, and
And you use this in combination almost always with the motors running quarter throttle and the jib fully
well,
deployed.
because it's a wing, and because it's para type sail that has air slits in the very front.
Yeah.
So you have to, in order for it to operate, you have to have forward motion,
Yeah.
wind blowing at it for it to work. And then it works as an amplifier, not necessarily
Yeah.
the primary motive source, but as an amplifier, kind of like an air conditioner works.
Well,
Uh,
would you use this without the motors?
Yeah, you can sail with it without the motors. The results aren't as dramatic.
Yeah.
And you can use it as that sail right there, which is I think about 30 square feet, has
Mhm.
equal power to the 90-foot mainsail
Yeah.
in 10-mile-an-hour winds.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, oftentimes, I would have the mainsail furled up, and I would just be working just off the wing, and it sails just as good, with just the wing as it does off the mainsail.
And then what wind range would you typically use this in?
These things are really designed for low wind,
Yeah.
under 6 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And the
So
natural
if the winds
wind.
got up to like 15 to 20, you might have this roller reefed in and just going off the
You would
mainsail.
put it down.
Yeah.
Yeah, it gets to that much. Now, when it was new, it was designed to just release the line, the tension line, and it would just freewheel and like weather vane and settle. So it
Yeah.
wouldn't provide any driving force or wouldn't do anything, so
Yeah.
you could go out in 15-mile. That's how I tested it. I went out in 15-mile-an-hour winds just offshore and no lines controlling it, and pedaled figure eights out just offshore in
Yeah.
15-mile-an-hour winds
See what it
to
would do.
see if there was any problem with negotiating around. But when it's in neutral, that's what I call neutral.
Mhm.
It just weather vanes just like a weather vane on top of a
Flag.
house,
Yeah. Yeah.
and doesn't have any. There's almost no side force.
Mhm.
The force that's trying to tip your boat over,
Yeah.
it's almost zero. So
Wow.
it works
Wow.
really well.
All right. Well, let's take a couple looks. That's good. It rolled up
That's
there.
with it all furled up.
Yeah.
Now, if you're in high winds and you got that furled up, I don't think you want to have that up. That's
So
why
you
I
would
had a
even
halyard line.
take the halyard and just drop it and then lash it to the
Drop
side
it.
of the boat.
Yeah, if you're in
Yeah.
trouble, you
Just drop
furl
it.
it up just like that. That's the way it was stored on the boat.
Yeah.
When I got back to shore, I shoved the boat up on shore, shove it up on the trailer, uh, furl that thing up, and just lay it down in the hull. It
Yeah.
never got removed from the boat. So.
Yeah. And there's a couple of videos here people could look at, that show it in operation. But I just wanted to kind of highlight that because that was one of the major changes I think he made to the boat in addition to the hull shapes. And again, we're not going to look at all 35 pages here, but I wanted to maybe jump up one more and then we'll kind of wrap up this part of the agenda and move on. I'll maybe just jump to the last one and maybe just look at a previous one. So we're now near the end of, we're into 2021. Previous, well, I think I jumped off the wrong subjects currently. I'll just go to here. So yeah, this is kind of the most recent comments over the last year. And some people are just asking, kind of some, again, Q&A. So I think we covered this particular agenda item. Let me just switch back. We wanted to cover some of the modifications that were done there. What I'd like to do next is just switch over to, let's see if it's this one. Yeah, I want to switch over to this one. And Bob, you and I talked a little bit about this earlier today, but this is another post that I did going back a few years now. And really the genesis around this was I've been making tweaks to my Hobie Tandem Island, similar to, not as aggressive as what Bob has done, but I made a number of tweaks and I said, gee, wouldn't it be nice if Hobie can update the Tandem Island and then thereby Jim doesn't have to do as much modifications, on future Hobie Tandem Islands. But the goal here was to probably design a new hull, taking the Hobie Tandem Island design as it currently sits and looking to either update it with a refresh of the design or maybe leaving the Hobie Tandem Island as is and just coming out with a brand new boat. And we came up with a name, just Hobie Tandem Offshore, for some new ideas. So we just ran through these ideas. We had construction, keep with the rotomolded, carbon fiber, stainless steel. Those are the current materials that are used on the current Hobie Tandem Island. We had talked about keeping the length the same. We talked about maybe trying to raise the height of the freeboard, if you will, from the water line up to the top of the kayak, maybe by 1 or 2 inches. The current Tandem Island sits pretty low in the water. That's a strength in some conditions. It can be a little bit a hindrance in others. So one idea was maybe trying to raise the, this is the, of all the kayaks that Hobie currently has. This is the one that sits the lowest in the water. Many of the other Hobie kayaks, whether it's the Outback or it's the Revolution or the Oasis, they sit about an inch or two higher off the water. The Tandem Island, it sits the lowest. And so anyway, one idea was just try to raise the height of that, mainly to raise the height of these Aka bars off the water a little bit. So when the waves come by, they're not constantly smashing into the Aka bars. And many people have designed, spray skirts and things to minimize that. The other part around here is just the hull shape to flatten out the front decks. There are a lot of these grooved, I call them the old style places to put your feet when you're paddling the kayaks. And it turns out the Hobie Tandem Island, I think, is not paddled that much. It's mostly the Mirage drives or the sail or the motor. And pure just paddling is not the predominant use. And so there's not as much need to have these grooves in the hull. You can flatten it out, have a flatter surface to stand on, I guess is kind of the takeaway. Capacity, the current capacity, if you read these yellow stickers on these boats, is around 600 pounds. That really hasn't changed over the years. We're looking to try and increase that a little bit. And I know, Bob, you've increased the flotation of your modifications with your stern and slippers that you put on to increase the overall flotation.
I got it up to 800, and the boat
Yeah.
sits a little higher in the water as a result.
Yeah. So the proposal was to Hobie, if they were to redesign this, to try and increase that capacity a little bit and then raise it up, as Bob just indicated. A larger sail plan, built in strength in the mast and reinforcing the bow to support a jib or a Genoa with a roller reefing. The mast topper, we already talked about that. A bow sprit. Bob already talked a little bit about the bow sprit, but build that into the future design. The Mirage drives, we said basically no change. Those work the newer ones work pretty much as advertised. The mast length, possibly a little bit larger with that topper to address the different sail configurations. Also offshore, one of the ideas I came up with is you're always worried about other boats seeing you, larger boats. And I know they make these radar reflectors that you can slip inside a mast. The mast is hollow, and it's another way to maybe increase the visibility of your boat for larger boats so they can avoid you. Stronger mast receiver. We mentioned about snapping that bottom bolt to make it stronger for the sail plan. Possibly fore and aft bracing of that mast. Right now you get the V-braced, going underneath the H-bar inside the hull. That may come up with some design to strengthen that. The bow, stronger head sail support, main hatch redesign. This has always been a weak spot for the Hobie Tandem Islands with water egress from that front hatch. It's common that water comes in from this waves breaking over the top. And the concept was to go to more of a flat hatch design and a bigger hatch areas. We'll talk about that in a minute. The stern, larger squared off stern for planing. We already talked about, Bob, your design with that larger, flatter stern. And that was one of the ideas that we kind of built upon to incorporate that into a redesign of the hull. So I won't take time to go over all of these. We got the Akas, I think would be the one that I would point out is that there would be a need to make these a little bit wider and a little bit stronger. There's the Aka brace, these black bars here. They have a break-off shear pin, and that's if your AMA hits like the beach or a piling, this will snap and break as a sacrificial break so that your Akas don't break and the AMAs will slide to the back. And that's where you have the safety lines to help from that happening. But the idea is to strengthen the Aka bars to make them stronger. And there's a number of changes that can be made by inserting fiberglass rods on the inside of these Akas, since they're hollow aluminum tubes, and also filling them with structural foam that would expand. So that's some of the options that can be done there. and I have just recently injected foam into my Akkas this past weekend. Actually, I worked on this. And Bob, just to update you, I had taken some of that Home Depot foam that comes in the can, and I was able to spray that into the interior of these Akkas. And when that expanding foam expands, it does expand and squirts out. And I was surprised at all the different places and all the rivet holes and places that foam started to squirt out.
Yeah.
And the one thing I would say, I did use that the great gap filler stuff, I guess it's called. It's not structural foam, but it does get pretty hard. It does fill the gaps, and I think it will improve the strength of those Akkas a little bit. But I think that two-part form that you mentioned, I think would probably still be a better use, because that's an exothermic reaction, and that
Yes.
goes to completion. The foam that comes in those cans where you spray the insulation filler, that's not exothermic. It's actually triggered by moisture. Humidity in the air is what causes that to expand. And I found that these Akkas are closed, so they don't see the humidity. And so what I had to do was spray some water inside the Akkas first to get them moist. Not a lot, just a couple mLs really in each of these Akkas. And then that was enough humidity to cause the reaction to go rigorously to get the foam to expand out. So, but anyway, the idea is to strengthen these Akkas is one of the ideas here. Another idea is just replace all the 8-inch hatches, these circular hatches, 3 of them, with the larger rectangular hatches like the Hobie Pro Angler. Just gives you a much easier access to the inside of the hull, and you can stand on it easier. So that would be another design recommendation. Outboard motor mounts, to build those in. So it's something you can just clip on, almost like using the rod holders that are in the back, but built something in here on the stern that you could clip on a motor mount without a lot of customization required. Nav lights, electric board, beach rollers. So these are all some initial ideas. And about 6 months later, we came up with, thinking was, the feedback was, Hobie's never going to spend the money to do all these changes. And so one of the ideas we came back with was keep all the hardware the same, but just change the center hull and pick up some of the larger hatches like you see on either the Pro Angler, the Outback. These are just some of the changes that they've made. Basically, the green text here is just say new mold for TI hull, and using the 2019 Outback as idea. So this yellow piece is the 2019 Outback, and I think it's been updated even recently in 2021. But the idea is just change the center hull was the main takeaway. Keep everything else the same. The idea would be get a squared off hull in the back, a little flatter stern, the bigger hatches, the flat area to stand on, and there's none of the ribbing that is in the current Tandem Islands. And then you could see the stuff in green would be the stuff that could be done to keep the cost minimum. So that's just some of the ideas that I'd like to throw out there. I don't know if Bobby had any comments on any of these ideas. And I know Hobie here in 2023 is focusing on their fishing kayaks, I believe, is their sole focus, and they've discontinued the Hobie Adventure Island. They're still selling the Hobie Tandem Island, but they really haven't made any changes to it. So it's been kind of getting a little bit long in the tooth, and it's hopefully there'll be an opportunity to do a refresh on this, but certainly economics will drive that with the new owners at Hobie. But I know you've had some experience, Bob, working with Hobie. Anything you'd like to add there as far as what you see in there?
There is a way to do it. I doubt very much if Hobie's gonna make a new mold because they sold their sailing business recently.
Do you know if
They're
that's do you know if the sale of their sailing business, does that include the Tandem Island, or is that like the
No,
the
it does
Hobie
not
Cat?
include the Tandem Island. And because their kayak business is approximately 50 times larger in the
Yeah.
sailing business. It's just a matter of economics. I mean,
Yeah.
they're doing bangbusters, selling all the different pedal boards and
Yeah.
kayaks and things like that. That's their bread and butter nowadays. And so they because if you think about it, how many Hobie 16s did they sell a year? Not very many. So,
Yeah.
and the other, like a lot of those boats that the catamarans that you see are most of them that are out there were built in the pre-80s. So
Yeah.
they're just maintained well. But so their bread and butter is the kayaks and the high concentration on fishing.
Yeah.
Kayaks and sports. So the Tandem Island, it's a good seller.
Mhm.
So they're gonna keep it, but it's really designed for beginning sailors, people
Yeah.
they're just starting out sailing, and it's safe, relatively safe.
Yeah, it's hard to capsize. It's
Yeah.
easy to pedal around, and
So when you get into a little bit more hardcore, like on the things that I did, uh, then it's not really well suited.
yeah, it's
But
a much smaller
but
market.
yeah, and also, but that there's workarounds for every single aspect of it. Like my boat, when I got it to the final design, probably around 2014, the thing could outperform a Weta or a whatever the Wind Rider 17.
Yeah, Wind Rider
It runs
17.
circles around any of those boats, pretty
Yeah.
much any boat out there. So, yeah, so there's stuff you can do. And one of the ideas that only saw it once, that was for the EC event. Somebody had built and modified the Tandem Island with a slipper that slips around the hull to get the correct hull shape.
Yeah.
And they did that race, and that's the only time I ever heard of it, and the only time I ever saw it was that slipper. I
Yeah,
had
you're
done
talking about
previously
you're talking
years
about the
before doing
Everglades.
my hull mod, but this was way above beyond and
Yeah.
beyond. So my moving forward, I figured out a way how to do it. And if I was to get another, health wise, I can't do it. But if I was to do another one, I'd definitely be putting a slipper on there, and that can be removed. So when you want to use the boat as a kayak, you just remove the slipper.
So it's
And
almost like
my
a
whole
boat.
mod, it took me 5 minutes to remove that hull mod. It was just strapped on. And if we were doing kayaking, we'd just take it off and just keep it at
Yeah.
the campsite.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. It's almost like a boat within a boat, that slipper
Yeah. And
concept.
it just sits on there, easy to lift off, folds up.
And that
and
slipper would fit around just the stern, or would be the whole
No, the entire
and the
boat.
stern? Entire
The
boat.
entire boat. It's just like a swimming pool vinyl, like on
Yeah. Yeah.
but
But it'd be
very hard.
something.
It goes the bulk of the distance. And
It would
then there's
cover the
patches of foam.
whole exterior of the hull that gets wet by the water.
Yeah.
Yeah, would cover
And
that.
then it's held on by just buttons,
Mhm.
that you basically lay it in like you're putting it into a sleeping bag, and
Yeah.
then you just click buttons every 2 feet
Yeah.
to kind of hold it up,
Hold it in place.
hold it in place.
And it gives it more
But it has
flotation and a faster speed.
Yeah, and what it'll give you is a planing hull. It's modeled after almost any other sailboat hull shape, like
Yeah.
a Sunfish or a
Yeah.
Laser. If you
Yeah.
look at the whole forms on those,
Yeah.
and it automatically gives you, by adding the foam in certain areas, gives you 200 additional pounds of flotation,
Yeah.
and it gives you the ability to plane. And it also raises the boat out of the water 2 inches.
Yeah. Which
So
is critical for waves hitting these Akkas.
yeah,
uh,
and
as you
then
mentioned.
when you raise the boat up 2 to 3 inches out of the water, it raises the AMAs. And then another factor on that is by extending the AMAs out a foot on each side.
Yeah.
Those, when you're cruising along just on flat water, your AMAs are completely out of the water.
Yeah. And just on the extending the ACAs,
That's the biggest thing that you can do.
Yeah.
That to improve, especially if you're putting on more sailing area.
yeah. And to do that, you actually cut these and extended by putting some fiberglass rods inside
No,
these,
actually, I used aluminum.
or aluminum rods. Yeah.
Yeah, it was aluminum and just extended it out.
Yeah.
And then
On both
it's
sides, 12 inches on both sides.
yeah. A
Yeah.
foot, but I used a little more than a foot, but I think a foot would suffice.
Yeah.
And you do it out near before the curve starts near the outboard end.
Yeah.
And then you know, of course, mine were all reinforced. I had some rods in there to help make it all stronger because I needed it stronger for when we're caught out offshore in 4-foot waves. Everything had to
Yeah.
be stronger. So
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. All right, so let's switch gears here again, and let's go back to wanted to now kind of, we've talked about the water conditions, we talked about the modifications. I'd like to move next to just the Florida Keys and end up with talking about the Florida Keys here a little bit. But before I do that, Bob, anything else you want to just raise about the Tandem Island itself before we get into talking about the Keys?
no, it just I love the boats. They're the most incredible design I've ever come across.
Yeah, it is a very versatile boat. I would agree. It gives you, and it's a good boat for beginners. And you can take it with some reinforcement offshore safely, with the appropriate safety precautions like the motors, the strengthening, the added sails, the added flotation, and certainly offshore, certainly the life jackets. I always sail with the EPIRB, a personal locator beacon, that kind of marine radio stuff you do for safety. These are all, this isn't so much a safety discussion. This is more talking about some of the design changes related to the boat. All right, so let's jump right into the Florida Keys. We'll kind of end this section talking about sailing in the Florida Keys. And I want to kind of just, people that are not familiar with this, we're talking about the southern tip of Florida in the United States. And this is a chain of islands that runs off the tip of Florida, just north of Cuba and just south of Florida. And I'm guessing it's about 100 miles from Key Largo,
129 miles.
all the way out to Key West. And so there's a beautiful area out here to do a lot of sailing. And maybe, Bob, you can just talk a little bit about kind of generally what were your most, where were some of the areas that you spent most of the time sailing? I know you had a home in Key West, and we can zoom in here a little bit. But maybe before we zoom in, just talk about the length of the Keys and kind of, as we look from one end of Key Largo, attached to just south of Miami up here, all the way down to Key West, where would you be spending most of your time?
Okay, well, let's zoom up on Key Largo, that
Key
area,
Largo, okay, yeah.
the north end.
Yeah.
And we spent a lot of time there. And all the hottest diving areas are off of Pennicamp Park. And there's like the Statue of the Christ or whatever, and all the really cool dives are on the Atlantic side, where the about 5 to 10 to 15 miles offshore.
So here we are zoomed in on the southern tip of Key Largo and a northern tip of Plantation Key. And this is Traveneer Cut, I believe, coming out to the Atlantic side over here. And if you were to say, drop a pin of where the good snorkeling pieces are,
you have to go north a little bit from here. So keep on going up to where Pennicamp is on the south end of
all right, you let me know when you see Pennicamp here.
It's right there.
Christ of the Deep.
Yeah, right there. You can zoom out just a little bit.
Zoom out. Okay.
Christ
Yeah.
of the Deep, we've dove that.
Yeah.
Grecian Rocks, we've
I'm
dove
just
that.
I'm just doing a little save button here for these stars. Okay. And what was the other one?
There's another one called it's not labeled, but we've gone to there a lot. It's the crane, because there's a crane buried underwater. And then we've hit most of the dive areas. If you go into like Dive USA, I think it's called,
Yeah.
they highlight the cool
Yeah, there's
coral
a
reefs.
lighthouse out here. There's John Pennekamp Coral Reef State Park.
Yeah.
I guess that's this whole area here.
Yeah, and the coral reefs are right around 5 miles to 12 off the right side, going, quite a few miles. And that's where the all the charters go, and
Yeah, I was
there's
going
some
to ask you about the charters. So let's say you're starting, where do the charters go? They're pretty much in this area here.
that whole area off of Pennicamp and up north and a little bit down south, and there's some dive wrecks down there too. So
Yeah.
that you just pick which place you want to go.
Yeah. And then how about
But
the
the downside to that is going on commercials, on charters. By the time you have 4 people along, you're like $1,000 to go diving. So for the day, so it gets very expensive very fast.
yeah.
So,
And
and we
that's
used to have our own boat. It was a Sea Ray. That was a $60,000 boat, and it cost us $400 a month to store it. Plus, we'd go through on a weekend. We'd easily go through $300 of fuel.
yeah,
So
it costs a
we
lot
got rid of
fuel.
that.
So if you mentioned that, just to zoom out again, just to get my orientation. So we got
Okay, if you
Travener
zoom up,
here.
if where I would not trust with a standard TI unless you got super experience, offshore experience like I do. I would not recommend going to any of the diving spots that are 5-7 miles. It's just too dang dangerous.
Yeah.
But if you zoom up on where you're at right here, and you zoom in a little bit, it's just on the key, right, just south of the John Pennekamp Coral Reefs type park. Keep zooming closer.
So here's the state park. And here's Key Largo, of course.
Yeah, and
There's
then
the Christ of the Deep.
there's the places that's kind of nice to dive are just keep on scrolling up a little bit more.
Yeah.
No, the down, I meant.
Okay, yeah. And
The
then
other
yeah, so this Christ of the Deep, go a little bit closer, is Mosquito Sands.
Yeah.
These are some of the dive locations. How about for if you're just doing snorkeling, you want to do 10
Yeah,
feet?
that's what I'm trying to get to is see where it says Shark Rodriguez Key there, and Sharky's Shark Bait Grill.
Over here, yeah.
That whole area around there is beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's great for snorkeling. And if
Yeah.
you're just doing snorkeling, it's not too far offshore, it's safe.
Okay, yeah.
If you're doing snorkeling, that's the place to go. That
And
area,
where,
all
like,
down here.
where would the commercial snorkeling guys, when they take you in a commercial boat to go snorkeling, would they go to a place like this, or they going offshore?
No, they go a little bit further out, to like 20 foot deep water, for the snorkeling excursions. At least we'd never been on a snorkeling excursion.
And my understanding is that they don't let you anchor in a lot of places, and you got to tie up to these moorings that they
all
have.
of the protected areas, they have moorings that you have to tie to. You cannot drop an anchor on a protected area.
Yeah. And it's just what,
You
first come, first
cannot
serve?
have a spearfish gun on board or fishing gear on board. when you go into these super
Protected
protected
areas.
areas.
Yeah.
Because you'll get fined even if you never get it out, so.
Yeah. All right, and then so places near shore for snorkeling, that would be a lot of fun. That
The
don't get
area
deep,
that your mouse is around is right around there.
right around here. And we're gonna be renting a house right where this star is here, with a dock, and you can just drop the TI, you know, I can keep it in the water, and just step on it and go sailing. And that's kind of where we're gonna be starting. And there's a little place in here called a toilet seat cut. It runs
North of
through
where-
here, which then runs over to the I call it the Travenier cut. I'm not sure what everyone else calls it, but it's this cut that goes out to the Atlantic side. You certainly have to
The
lower the
only thing, you
mast.
have to drop your mast right
Gotta
there.
drop the mast here. But then I guess you just run out through here. Let's just say you're going over to
And any around that area, you can snorkel.
Yeah.
It's actually very nice.
and then or just sail up to here. And tell me about, it sounds like you've been in these exact waters many times.
Yes.
Tell me about the ocean currents and the tides. What kind of speed can you expect? Is that a big problem in this area as far as currents from
No,
low to high
the tides aren't too bad. We've never really been in trouble with any tides up north. You know, this is way north for us.
Yeah.
But we went out there many times. We'd go there and stay like a weekend. We'd usually on the left-hand side of the road, just south of Key Largo, there's a place called the Hilton on the left side of the road when you're going south. It's we stayed there a lot, and
Yeah.
there's some smaller places that we stayed at a little further south from there. We'd go for like 3 days.
Yeah.
And most of the resorts there, they allow you to park your boat overnight just on the shore. So you only
Yeah.
set it up.
which is a big advantage. And you just launch it off the beach then, I guess, and
Yeah, you just beach launch, and
Yeah.
then, you take your Mirage drives and your
Yeah.
all the good stuff
all the
inside,
valuable stuff,
the
put it
hotel.
inside. Yeah. And then when you're offshore, let's just say you're in this Rodriguez Key, or you're maybe pushed out a little bit further to some of these places. What kind of currents would you experience when you're
We
just tied
we
up?
never really noticed anything that was knocking us down or anything
Okay.
like that. Of course, you're in the middle of the Gulf Stream over
Yeah.
on the right side of your screen here. That's the Gulf
yeah.
Stream right there.
Yeah,
That's
kinda
going
was-
5 to 7 miles an hour. So
that's why I was
that
trying to
is the
say.
Gulf
I know
Stream.
the Gulf Stream is 5 to 7, but is it 5 to 7 here, or is it 5
No.
to 7 over here?
No, right where it says White Banks, in that area, that's where the reefs are. That's where the Gulf Stream is. So
Okay.
that's the
So
Gulf
all of
Stream.
this area here would be Gulf Stream.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. But when you get, let's say, get a mile further inland, it's not as strong.
No, it's not. We never noticed any like strong currents that were like getting us in trouble or anything
Yeah.
like that.
Because you
It's
get into
nowhere
5 to
near as
7,
dangerous as Key West.
yeah, 5 to 7 miles an hour. It's tough to move against, as you know. Unless you got a motor and the sail and everything else going in your favor, in the wind. And then you mentioned the winds here are mostly light.
Mostly light most of the year. So
So-
October, November kicks up a little bit, but if you're going
Yeah.
up there in July, August, you're gonna have, on any given day, 5-mile-an-hour winds.
Yeah. How about March?
March, it's a little bit more. You might get to like 8 mile an hour, 7, 8.
Yeah.
You get down in Key West, you get more of a trade winds. So,
Yeah, so
you
let's,
get a little bit more
let's,
once you get up north.
And before we go down to Key West, let's stick here for a second. We talked a lot about the ocean side here. I know you've mentioned that the bay side is kind of just a big muddy flat. If you
Yeah, and
paraphrase it, but can you
the problem
sail in
is the
these?
shallow water. It's really hard to sail in the shallow water. There's so many scary shallow areas over
Yeah.
there.
And shallow meaning you can't even get there with the TI where you only need 1 to 2 feet. But it's shallower than that. So you're running aground with your Mirage drives or your rudders kicking
Or
up.
worse yet, through weeds. You know, if you got a foot of water and there's weeds in there, you're not going anywhere fast.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, that's good. I've just never sailed actually in these waters. I know you mentioned it. I've have some exposure to it. Just zooming out here, we do have the Everglades Challenge from Water Tribe every year, where they sail from up in your neck of the woods, I think Fort DeSoto. They launch right off this beach. I think you've been on that beach. Have you ever participated in that Everglades Challenge?
No, I never was physically able. I prepared for it every year, and you know, my boat was pretty much, I could have won, but they don't allow motors. So I'm not about to go offshore without a motor. So
Yeah.
period.
And I thought I saw this year that they're allowing that for the first time. I'm not sure. Maybe it's a separate division, but anyway, for those not familiar, there's a contest called the Everglades Challenge that actually sails from up here in St. Petersburg, Fort DeSoto. And if I annotate real quickly here, if I can get my buttons working, just to spotlight this for a second.
Yeah, their website is watertribe.com.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm a member, and I've been
I'm
for
a member of it
many,
also.
many years.
They launch right out of here, and it's a race, and people sail overnight, hopping down through checkpoints all the way down, and they end up at Key Largo. Is the end of the race. It's about 300 miles.
Yes.
And you can go. There's a couple of inland passages, I guess you can take through some of the Everglades part.
Yeah,
There's some different passes here, the inside or the outside pass around Cape Marco, Cape Romano, and the 10,000 islands, and all the way down to here. So anyway, that's called the Everglades Challenge. And it's a whole raft of boats, including a bunch of TIs. Hobie TIs participate in it. And it's a fun little activity that people participate in.
First week of March every year.
Yeah. And I'm thinking of just trying to drive up there and just doing a day sail around just to film the start of it, and then drive back down here and maybe film people coming in at the end as part of what I'm thinking about for this year in 2023. All right, let's zoom in, and we'll kind of end up with kind of just a little bit of look at Key West, and also let me just, you know, between Pennycamp up here all the way down to Key West, is there any other highlights besides Key West that you want to point out to say, hey, don't miss this, it's a good place to have some fun?
We've stayed a lot of times north of
Big Key, Big Pine Key.
we've never stayed there. You go right around Sugarloaf Key there.
Yeah.
There's a resort that we stayed at a lot at mile marker 13 and a half. And that's Sugarloaf Key, and then you got I think it's Blue Key, Blue Water RV Resort is exactly where we stayed.
Yeah.
And we did a lot of sailing there from there and stuff. And that's that whole area is fascinating. And it's called Horseshoe Key, and it's just nice. It's a lot of shallow water, really nice for sailing around. You can actually catch lobster once in a while.
When you launched out of here, I mean, were you kind of staying in the backwaters here, or would you?
Yeah, no, we mostly went into the backwaters, and if you zoom up on it a little more,
Zoom in on it?
Yeah, zoom up on it. There's a canal across the back of it. And then what we would do is that red, we would launch and just go down that canal in the back, and then go out into the main water, into the main channel. And then we just go around.
Where does it go from here? Is this the main channel here?
That's the main channel, and then it goes out into Horseshoe Key, and then you can get underneath. Over to the right, you can get underneath there, sometimes you have to drop your sail, but that's not a big deal.
I mean,
And
going
then
through
we
here,
just roamed around all there and just you gotta drop your mast there.
yeah. But I mean, would you just spend most of the time on
We
the bay
just
side?
banged around that whole area and we always
Yeah.
had a blast. So but
Right.
we'd go on both sides and it's just a nice area. So
All right, let me ask you another question. If you're just banging around in these areas out here, on these very small little islands and sailing between them and et cetera, any issues with alligators?
no, there's no gators anywhere.
I didn't think there were, but I wanted to confirm that. And the reason I do this, I sometimes sail with a small dog on the boat, and sometimes we'll hop out and walk around. But I don't want them to hop out and become gator bait. So that's what I'm trying to.
No, there's no gators there or saltwater crocs or anything.
Yeah. All right, and then we work our way down to Key Largo. We got the naval station. I mean, excuse me, Key West. We got the naval station, and here we are in Key West proper. And you mentioned Higgs Beach, I think, was an area.
Yeah,
that
we always ended up launching there.
Yeah. Help me.
It's just our
Where would
favorite.
that boat ramp be? Were you saying there's a boat ramp? Was
Okay,
that
if you keep on scrolling to the left,
yeah.
no, the other left, right,
Okay, the right.
and then you find a Vietnam Memorial.
Let's see, there's a. I did see it the other day. Where is it? There's a Higgs Beach Memorial Beach Park. Is that the memorial there? Higgs
um,
Memorial?
let's see, let me get reference.
So there's Higgs Pier. There's a
No,
pier
you keep on going,
further west.
yeah, further west.
This way, there's a big resort here now.
No, further east, I mean,
Okay, we'll go east.
yeah.
There's a battery
There's
here.
that pier there, and then
There's a big pier. Sticks out quite a ways. There's a
that's where the Vietnam Memorial is. And then you
I was looking
there's a house.
Tennis
You get too
court.
far south there. All the boat rentals and stuff are right there on that area around there. And then
trying to I see a parking lot here. There's a salute on the beach, Higgs Memorial, Higgs Beach Memorial Pier. I just didn't see it looked like maybe there might have been a boat ramp at some time here, but I don't see anything active.
yeah, I've never looked at a map.
Um, so I
Okay,
was trying to zoom out a little bit. You got these three piers here. Looks like this is the biggest one here, Edward Knight Pier. But I just couldn't put my finger on. I see Higgs Beach, but I just couldn't see the boat ramp itself.
yeah, zoom way up. Way up. No, to get closer. Let's go a lot closer.
Okay, yeah.
Because I can, I can walk it. So
Yeah, so here's Higgs Memorial Park. There's a memorial.
okay, and see that wall there, that retaining wall, that's right where your mouse and cursor is where we'd launch. When
Okay.
we car topped, we'd park in the parking lot up
Okay,
there.
so it's
we
just a
drag the
beach.
boat
It's a beach
to
launch.
beach launch right there. So
Yeah, okay.
that's where probably 50-60% of the time is where we would launch from.
Yeah, and you just park your car up here somewhere.
Park your car up there, we had a car
Just
top.
walk it down in pieces, down to the
Yeah, you could walk the hall in one
Yeah.
walk, and then now slowly go to the right.
Let me
and
just
then-
put a pin here first. I'm just doing a save.
Okay.
All right, good. We got that. And we're going to go to the right,
Yeah,
further east.
zoom up, zoom way, and
Yeah.
okay, I'm looking for the. Doesn't look anything familiar to I lived there.
Yeah, well, it could have changed, over storms and stuff. Uh, Certainly that can happen. Was this
That's-
pier up here, this big pier?
Yeah, that's been there.
It looks like a helipad at the end here. I don't know. But yeah, it looks like there's a pier here, something submerged underneath here.
Yeah,
Uh,
we'd try and catch lobsters and stuff there.
Yeah,
Yeah, zoom way up on the area just to your upper right tower and QS Garden. There was a place called the Vietnam Memorial, and I swear it was right there.
let me just search for it. Here, I think I can just do a search. Give me a second. I clear the search first. Vietnam.
I thought it was closer to Higgs, but maybe it's further.
Vietnam Memorial. Uh, just search here.
Let's just scroll over to the left and
Yeah, this took me back to Washington, D.C. We don't want to go there. But
yeah, just keep on scrolling over and then we'll see if we can find it.
yeah.
There's a
What is-
parking lot. The reason I want to find it is there's a nice parking lot that you can park at
Yeah,
that-
I got you.
there.
Yeah, and when I did a search on boat ramps, I was searching for the boat ramp, and I think one came up right in here
Yeah,
somewhere.
it's like a secret.
There's like a little boat ramp right here. I see the trailers, the cars that are dropping
Yeah.
in the boat ramp right here. Let me just put a pin here while I'm here. There's a boat ramp right there. Let me just put a pin here. Drop a
Yeah, I
pin.
never knew about that.
There's a boat ramp right there that you could sail then down this little straight canal that you had to go under this bridge, but then it eventually opens up where you can run out to the Atlantic.
Yeah, all that area around there is very shallow. No fun to be.
Yeah, all
Same
of
thing
this.
on the west side of the island.
Yeah. Yeah, and you mentioned earlier that there were some strong currents to avoid if you look at zooming way
Yeah,
out.
if you go right where your mouse is there,
Yeah,
you'll find Mallory Point. It's just south of your mouse.
this right here.
Square and stuff like that. Yeah.
Um,
Oh, you're Fort Zach. Okay, go. You gotta go north from there. Mallory Square, the cruise ship channel
Yeah.
and all that. You see all those cruise ships there?
I do, yeah.
Okay, that current constantly north to south is 6 miles an hour all the time
Between these two
And-
bodies of water here, between that
between these two bodies of water. And there's a Simonton Street launch right there, somewhere in there. And if you try and launch there, you get a real dickens of the time. The Simonton Beach, just at the turn there,
yeah,
right? Your mouse is almost on it.
I see it.
That's the launch right there.
All right, and that's a beach launch also.
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
it's a ramp. It's a ramp. And that might even be my boat there.
So this is a street view.
Yeah.
They got all these guys showing up, but I guess you could just run the trailer in.
Yeah,
straight.
yeah, there's an actual ramp there that you
Yeah.
can go down and launch from. But if you do your turnaround, there's a parking lot right there,
Yeah.
and there's actual trailer parking, but it's like $2.60 an hour.
Yeah. Well, where's the trailer parking? Same lot or
Yeah, the same lot. There's actual couple of them that are labeled trailer parking.
Okay.
Actually, there's some trailers. There might be a trailer there.
Yeah, I didn't really see. Maybe over here. But all right, so that's these whatever the name of this beach was. And that's where,
Launch.
yeah, and that's where it looks like people could launch in. Certainly there's kayaks here. These look like rental kayaks.
Yeah.
Uh, stand-up
like-
paddle. What kind of kayaks? Those look like take out a team of 5 or 6 people on them, looks like.
Yeah. Pedaling.
Pedaling. Yeah. All right, so I'll put a pin on
We
this
used to
guy.
launch there a lot. And
Yeah.
what we would do is just go there, launch, and then go park somewhere.
Yeah. But the key takeaway is right out here,
That current is really dangerous.
current, you're gonna have let me just put a star there and I'll add a label, high current.
And that goes way south, all the way south of the island. Out a good mile or two,
So that's around 5 mile an hour current.
5 to 6, yeah.
All right, well, that's good to know. You hit enter on that.
And
Um,
we got caught up in that too many times. And what you have to do is see the Wisteria Island. What you have to do if you want to get back there
Yeah.
to your launch, you have to go clear around Wisteria Island. The
Yeah.
problem with where your mouse is, it's only 8 inches deep, the water.
Yeah, I see that. It looks all the yeah, so very shallow.
Yeah, and another thing about that area is the channels are only about 10 feet wide. The you can actually go up when you get closer to the town part.
Yeah,
And you have a dickens of a time.
yeah, because you're
Um,
10 feet wide yourself.
yeah, and the channels are so narrow that you have a heck of a time. You're not going to tack.
Right.
You're just
You're
not
right
going
on.
to tack because the channel you run the ground. So
Right, right.
and
And
the
then you
channel.
mentioned security wise, safety wise, to stay away from the islands offshore of Key West. Just
Yeah,
because
the ones that are west of there, that whole refuge, that whole thing is just stay out of there because don't go investigate. Well, for one thing, it's really shallow a lot of places, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of uh, coral hubs or whatever they're called.
Yeah,
And
they
they
do
take off
run
your
into,
keel and your rudder all the time. You never see them coming, and so, and then there's, in some of the shallow areas, there's oyster beds and stuff like that, but it's so shallow that it's not worth it. And then also that the drug trafficking and all that stuff,
yeah,
that
dangerous.
there's some islands in there that are like infested with that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And if you don't,
Get in the wrong spot at the
we were
wrong
told
time.
we got a lot of captain friends and stuff down on the island,
Yeah,
and they said just stay away from that whole area. It's just really dangerous.
yeah, dangerous area. All right, so that's anything else around Key West that I know there's Hemingway's house is in here somewhere, right? And then um, a lot of things for the tourists to see and do. But so it's Simpson's Beach, but a lot of current, and it's a beach launch. Higgs Beach, and that's also a beach launch. And you spent quite a
Yeah,
bit of time.
if you see Smathers Beach right there, that used to be there's some, like, you can rent Hobie waves and stuff down
Yeah.
at Smathers Beach, but there's
Yeah.
really no launch around there.
Yeah.
There used to be a launch right about where your mouse was,
Yeah.
but they closed that down. So,
Yeah.
and then
All right, and you got the airport right there.
actually,
All
I
right.
see the Vietnam Memorial is off to the left. I hope we can find it because there's a secret ramp right next to the building. Just I've never looked at a map before. I just know
Yeah.
the turf. down there, and I know where the stuff is. I thought it was just the little bit up from Higgs Beach, but apparently not.
Vietnam Memorial, Key West. Florida, Key West, Florida. Lawrence, Colorado, no. Yeah, it's not finding it on Google Maps here. Vietnam
Well,
Veterans.
I mean, it's been a couple of years since we've been there, so
Yeah,
they
yeah.
sort out.
Well, hopefully not. All right. Well, I think we're coming to the end of our very fun and engaging conversation. And before we wrap up, is there anything else that you'd like to volunteer or we want to raise and discuss related to either the Hobie Tandem Island or to the Florida Keys?
No, I've been a firm, I'm big into energy conservation and things like that. I believe the development of this as a tri-powered, so you can have, pedal power plus sail power plus motor power, whether it be electric or hybrid gas. The hybrid gas is still better, but the is just the one of the greatest developments of all time, in my opinion, and nobody's exploited it.
Yeah, it looks like there's room for some further innovation. I know certainly the use of the outboard motor has been a big game changer for me, expanding the range, out to 50 miles easy. And I know electric motors are becoming very common, and there's a whole raft of small 3 horsepower electric motors in the last 12 to 24 months that have come out that people are starting to stick on these Hobie Tandem Islands and other kayaks. And that's
Well, the whole trick to them is, they're generally designed for single kayaks, 10 to 12 feet long, maybe even a 16. But you get into a tandem island, it's 18 and a half feet, a lot more weight. So any of those motors that are out there, they're not going to do the job. But my philosophy, and when I put on the twin Hondas, was that if you can if you have the ability to actually design and build the propellers yourself, because nobody's going to sell them to you. If you put on like twin of those the electric motors, 2 of them, and then you're able to modify the props to what you need, you can get all the effects that you could ever imagine.
And the modification of the props, is that for the quarter throttle speed that you want to get a bigger bite of the water? That's why they get a bigger pitch for the lower RPMs. I mean,
well, basically all props are designed for a certain RPM, certain weight, a boat, and then they max out. So your props are designed for a certain speed, and you can actually calculate the pitch times the RPMs to get how fast the boat's going to go. And you'll find with those calculations that you're not going to be able to go faster than like 6-7 miles an hour, and that's about it. So when you increase the pitch on the props, you can get that number to 10 miles, 15 miles an hour. I had one set of props for 15 miles an hour, another one for 20. So
back when you were doing the foiling experiments.
That was a crazy, was a crazy.
And we haven't even talked about Hobie's dipping their toe into what was it called, a trifoiler?
One of my that's what kind of got one of my good friends is he owned a trifoiler, and
that's amazing.
We'd go out off in Sarasota Bay, and we were kind of competing a little bit, and hanging out, and that got me into the hydrofoils and got me in a lot of trouble. I did some pitch poles, and you gotta. It's really dangerous stuff, especially when you get into high horsepower, high speed. It's without knowing what you're doing for sure.
I hear you.
It's dangerous.
All right, Bob, I want to thank you for this lengthy interview. It was just fun talking to another Hobie Tandem Island sailor that's interested in exploring ways to improve it. I know you're not actively doing this right now, but you have a legend of inputs on the Hobie forum, and a lot of people respect your engineering design inputs.
Well,
and-
just because I'm physically not able, I still work closely with Hobie, so.
Yeah,
just,
yeah.
You know that. And, I got a lot of good friends over there, so.
Yeah.
I still work with them, but physically I'm handicapped now.
Yeah.
I don't have any ability to be able to act on the stuff that I think of.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And I'm getting a little bit elderly myself, so it kind of limits how far you can push it. But I want to really thank you for your interview on this video, and we'll be putting it up on YouTube within a week.
Okay, awesome. Nice. It's been fun. It's been fun for me reminiscing. Okay.
Very good. All right. Well, thank you very much. And we'll proceed to end our call today. So thank you. So bye.
Thank you. Bye now.